Hey everyone, I apologize for the delays in getting episodes out recently. I've been experiencing slow shipping and back orders on certain parts in order to get the engine bay prepped here. So what I'm going to do is release a couple of older videos that I filmed about a year ago. They are both on the Celica and the Miata, and I hope you'll enjoy them. Here they are. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Slow Car Salon. Today we're working on the Miata. It's a beautiful sunny day, so it's perfect for working outside. And I got a couple of upgrades including a limited slip diff and brakes. So let's get started. Okay, so here's what we're working with in terms of the diff. This diff is a Torsen limited slip differential from a 94R package Miata. So it's the this 1.8 size, 7-inch ring gear, mechanical Type 1 torque sensing LSD. So it should be pretty strong and last a pretty long time. And for longevity, of course, as I want to keep this diff in good shape as long as possible, I have brand new axle seals, brand new C-clips, which should be done with this kind of job anyway as you're swapping in new axles. New breather vent because the old one can get gummed up sometimes, like right here. It's all black and dirty and they get filled with oil vapors as the diff heats up and cools down over time. And now, as you'll notice, this diff has these stub axles in it, which we can easily pull out because I got the newer style half-shaft CV axles, which have splines on both sides. So this side is where it goes into the diff, and that will replace what's in here already, which are the sub-axles. And then for further future-proofing, I have the KMiata diff reinforcement plates. The diffs have a notch in them right here, which is a designed failure point, so at high power loads or other mishaps may occur where it actually causes the diff to break right in this very spot. So these plates go in place in order to reinforce this area right around like that. And there's another plate for the other side, and it comes with all the hardware you need. And then obviously some good fluid, some good old Redline, and then Driveshaft because my car is a 1991 and it has a smaller diff and therefore a different driveshaft. This driveshaft is a brand new unit from Flyin Miata, which the advantage to that is you get rebuildable U-joints, which is a huge plus in case they ever wear out. I'm experiencing a lot of drivetrain vibration in my car, and most likely that's due to U-joints in the drive shaft, so this will probably help tighten things up and make it all feel really solid again. Now for the brakes, we're going to be upgrading to the factory sport brakes found in the 2001 and 2002 Hard S model Miatas, and also any 03 to 05, including the Mazda speed. So for that we have calipers and brackets for both front and rear, rotors for both front and rear, pads for both front and rear, and then also the caliper hardware, including little boots here that go over the slider bolts for the caliper itself and the new brake pad clips and whatnot. So that's all going to get rebuilt, although I'm not redoing the seals in these calipers. Now with these bigger sport brakes, often you'll find that the current wheels on your car may not fit over them. Now, my wheels do fit over my current brake setup, which is a really old school budget big brake upgrade where it was provided by the MPCA or Miata Performance Club of America, where they just gave you a bracket to adapt the stock 1.6 caliper in there to use a kind of larger 11-inch diameter rotor, and my wheels were changed over stock in order to fit those, where these are 15 inches and the lip isn't super thick, so it barely clears in there with the caliper. It's got to fit over the big brake, and for that I have a spare wheel from a friend, which this is a TRM C1 15x7 plus 25. These I believe are known to fit over the sport brakes, but we're just going to make sure anyway. And if I find that my current wheels don't fit well, thankfully he has a few sets of these and I might be buying them off of him. Alright, enough chat, let's get to work. Okay, before we even think about jacking up the car to get things out, we should probably prepare the diff first, and that includes pulling the stub axles out, replacing the diff breather vent, and with the stub axles out, replacing the seals. Now, I did mention I had new C-clips for those axles, which I would go put on, but the new axles do come with the C-clips already, so I think we can omit the new ones unless perhaps something comes up and I have to absolutely use the OEM ones. Okay, unfortunately the time lapse I took was not great, but there they are. New axle seals are in, which note on that, to take out the old ones, I highly recommend a seal puller tool like this one. You just hook it right in, gets the seal right out. It does slightly damage the old seal, but if you're replacing them, I'm sure that's not a huge deal. And then diff breather vent, I just put a small amount of anti-seize on the threads just to make sure it comes out okay, and torqued it back down to about the same amount that it was to get it off, so just by feel there. Note for everybody, I'll put the OEM part numbers for these things in the description. Alright, now with the sufficient amount of aluminum removed from the diff, we're now going to add our aluminum back to it. So, yeah, it took a little bit of adjustment of getting the holes right so everything would line up, but here it finally is. Thankfully, these plates do have a little bit of wiggle room, but not as much as you might think, so just be careful as you're going through and installing this. But yeah, so this kit, the hardware kit, comes with two 10.9 grade bolts and washers for each side, and two nylock nuts as well. And that's how this all attaches. One bolt is also slightly longer than the other. I'm assuming the longer bolt goes more towards the inside because there's a little more material versus the outside. That makes more sense to me. So let's get this tightened up. All right, now to actually jack up the car. Okay, so the car is jacked up, wheels removed either side. I removed the upper part of the knuckle from the outer part of the upper control arm here, but then also loosened the lower control arm bolt in order to get this to kind of pivot around a little bit more and get the axles out a whole lot more easily, especially when it comes time to putting the new axles in. So with this, I think it's time to get under the car, remove the exhaust, drive shaft, and start taking the diff out. Alright, well I got the drive shaft and old axles out. I think you'll see them, let's see, somewhere over there. Yeah, old axles out, old drive shaft out. Now, one thing to note, you know, these drivetrain vibrations I was experiencing, well, there is a very good reason for that. You know, I was playing with the U-joints, both the front and the back here, and as I found, I tried holding this still and rotating this. That is a significant amount of play. U-joints were shot on this drive shaft for sure. That, I'm surprised it didn't explode, but wow. Well, there you go. Thankfully, new drive shaft has replaceable U-joints, is overall a little bit beefier, so we should be in no danger of breakage, and if there is something that wears out, I can always get it replaced. Alright, so the diff is basically ready to come out of the car, just need to be unbolted on either side and dropped with the hydraulic jack. Now, quick note is that where it attaches to the power plant frame, there's this one kind of captive washer thing right there, and and there's a little notch where you can kind of pry it out. Now there's another one like that on the top on the other bolt, so kind of up there for this bolt where you don't see that captive washer, you have to back the bolt out and then smash it in order to get the captive nut out of there. So just a quick note on trying to get these out if you find that the diff, you know, that you're not able to get the power plant frame out of the way of the diff to drop it. Alright, so now let's do it. Okay, so the diff is out. Funny enough, I'm supporting the PPF with a hammer so it doesn't just dangle there. Yeah, that really wasn't too bad. I guess only note real quick that I need to point out is that there were these little kind of rubber donut pieces here that also had these 10 mils at the end, which were bolted to the chassis or like kind of to the rear subframe. So bear in mind that you got to undo the 10 mils in order to bring that out. And then once you've got those off on either side, drop the jack and bring the diff out. Now, here they are side by side. Not too bad. Lastly, if you're doing the swap yourself, you don't really need to worry about using a new PPF from 1.8 car because this section here measures the exact same as the section on the 1.8 diff. They are both exactly 5 1/8 of an inch. So it'll slide in, no problem, and bolt right up. Alright, so it's a new day. While things got very dark and my camera ran out of battery, I wasn't really able to show the rest of the diff going in and everything working. However, it is in, it does work, and we unfortunately found a missing piece to the puzzle, which are these bolts here. And these connect the end of the drive shaft to the end of the diff for the torque transfer between the drive shaft and the diff. Unfortunately, the bolts for a 1.6 car are a smaller diameter than for a 1.8. I didn't realize that and had to run to the hardware store this morning with the Celica in order to get the right size bolts. Now these are 3/8-16 SAE bolts. They're grade 8, which is equivalent to class 10.9 for metric of the equivalent size. So I just got a handful of 1-inch long bolts, their appropriate nuts, and also some lock washers. And I was able to move the car around with the original bolts in there. However, for a more strong and longer lasting solution, I figured getting the proper bolts and also high grade bolts was the way to go. And also I still need to put the exhaust in because, well, just listen to this. It's a bit noise violation loud, don't you think? Maybe even if the camera mic didn't pick that up, I certainly did, my neighbor certainly did, so the exhaust has to go back in, as much as I would love to leave it out because it's noisy and raucous and awesome, but that's the last thing that's got to go in addition to the drive shaft bolts and torquing everything up. Fluid's already in the diff, so that's already squared away, and that's all we have left to do. Now we're working on brakes, and got the car up in the air already from wrapping up the Torsen install. We're going to take this off, get the caliper off, put it off to the side, and then put the new rotor on, try to get the new caliper on, fit the old wheel on, see if it'll even fit, and then try with the new one and see what route I have to take from there. Okay, the sport brakes are on. They actually aren't quite that much larger than the old setup. Here, let me go grab the old rotor. It looks like the old rotor is, I don't know, a little larger almost. Either way, the surface area of, the contact patch here is a little bit wider for sure than the old one. Well, this should mean good news for the wheels because, well, I guess we'll find out right now whether or not the old ones fit or not. Moment of truth. Well, they fit perfectly. Let's take a look. Wow, there is a lot more clearance than the old setup. You can actually kind of see through the rotor here and see a little gap between the wheel and the caliper there. However, the overall diameter of the rotor appears to be a little smaller, but like I said, that contact patch of the actual metal where the pad will contact the rotor, that's going to make all the difference. So I guess I get to keep my old wheels, as tempted as I am to get the TRMs. I'm going to try to mount them up anyway to see how they fit. It's good to confirm that at least the fronts will fit. Now for the rears on the brake dust shields, the fronts, they actually work, but the rears, you might be able to see that there's a little lip here where the edge of the dust shield kind of comes over the rotor. That might just need to be trimmed and might not be such a big deal in the end, and I might be able to use these stock ones. Okay, it is another day. I put the stock brakes back in after I test fitted the wheels, obviously because I needed to drive the car, but now we can get to the real work of doing the install and cleaning up the brakes and doing everything properly. So obviously I have all my calipers and whatnot in here, new pads, all the boots and clips here, and these two little buckets so I can spray everything down with some brake clean it off, use some lint-free towels, and then rebuild the calipers with the boots and whatnot, use some decent grease. So with that, let's get started. Okay, so after cleaning up the calipers, putting in the new boots and clips and pads and whatnot, I got the fronts installed and bled, and I'm making sure to bleed every corner as I go along. And then with the rear, just a little special note here with the rear. So the brake dust hubs, or rather, sorry, the brake dust shields are not removable, unfortunately. So I had to go in there with the cutting wheel right here and zip away a couple of corners and bend the dust shield out a little bit. Now, I didn't realize until later that the brake dust shields are integrated into the hub, so if you were going to do this mod yourself, I would see if you can get NB rear hubs with that, off of a car that came with the sport brakes if you're going to get all the parts for it, just so you don't have to cut into your brake dust shields like I did, which I didn't really want to do, but ended up having to do anyways. And again, hooking up my brake line, bleeding that side as I go along, so you don't leave a bunch of air all in over the system, because then you'll be chasing air bubbles everywhere, and that's not fun. At least, thankfully, I have, a vacuum bleeder here, which, we have a compressor, so that'll just suck the fluid through, and the little bleeder nipple there on the end gets it all out. So, I guess that's my only little installation note, but I mean, it fits, it rotates. Granted, after you've adjusted the rear brakes properly, they should be, just barely grabbing. There's a little adjuster back here, as there are two 14mm nuts. The inner one covers up a little adjuster screw, which you would get with a 4mm Allen, and that will allow you to adjust the clearance for the pads to the rotor. As with the fronts, you would just push the piston in with a tool or something like that to, open up the space between the pads and the rotor. But with the rears, it has a mechanical adjuster, so just keep that in mind as you're, trying to force the piston in and it's not doing anything. So that was pretty much all I had shot during that time of doing the brakes and the Torsen swap, and it's been a little over a year since I did it, and not only has the paint deteriorated on the Miata more since then, but the brakes and the Torsen have both held up miraculously well. I'm also still using the stock 91 Miata brake booster and brake master cylinder, and I know that the brake booster and master cylinders are a little bit bigger for those later Miata NB models. However, this still provides a very nice pedal feel without too much of an increase in pedal effort in order to drive the much larger calipers compared to the 1.6 size calipers. So that's pretty much it for this older episode interlude. After this, we'll be going back to our regularly scheduled programming, working on the Celica 1UZ swap, as well as now some new and cool things for the Miata coming up. So I hope you'll join me for those.